Thank you for watching. I'm Shakil 5858. I'm a Vietnam. I am thankful to all news resources and my team. Following news have been reported by American, European, Canadian, Asian, African, and Australian channel, and of course news agencies AFP, AP, and Reuters. Now the headlines: wildfire evacuation orders in different parts of Canada. Major shakeup in Russian army after Ukraine attack in Russian territory. The whole world is criticizing Israel for his actions in Gaza. Family reunion. Lots of Americans using apps for paycheck, between paycheck. Feelings of motherhood with children and without children. And adoptions. Animals in Ukraine and Russian attacks. Kharkiv, Russians and civilians. Big kidney transfer patient died. Roger Corman, a film producer, died. Now the news in detail.
On this Monday night, on high alert, the rapidly growing wildfires that have thousands of Western Canadians on the run.
The next 40 days will be a challenging situation.
The volatile conditions and air quality concerns. The prosecution's star witness testifies at Donald Trump's hush money trial, the lengths Michael Cohen said he went to protect his former boss. New encampments on Canadian campuses.
Trying to make us illegal is absolutely crazy.
The protesters' demands and defiance. And staying true to its Gaelic roots. Nova Scotia's mission to preserve and protect its culture and identity.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Carolyn Jarvis.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with the exploding wildfire emergency in Western Canada tonight. Extreme fire conditions are taking hold of northern BC and Alberta much earlier than normal, forcing thousands of people from their homes. In Fort Nelson, BC, this is the scene. A massive and fast-growing wildfire there has doubled in size. And today, officials warn that the Parker Lake wildfire continues to burn out of control and could reach the town in the hours ahead.
We have literally nearly 5,000 evacuees right now around the north. We are facing some extremely challenging conditions. We are extremely concerned.
Over the border in Alberta, there are two major wildfires near Fort McMurray and Grand Prairie. Locals there have been ordered out or are preparing to leave at a moment's notice. Neetu Garcha has our top story tonight.
An evacuation center and RV parks all full in Fort St. John, BC, as more than 5,000 people remain out of their homes, some struggling to get pet-friendly accommodations.
Paying for the gas, getting around is pretty tough, you know. Just the not knowing whether or not you have a home to go back to, you know.
Fort Nelson residents are using this surveillance camera to keep an eye on their home. The Parker Lake wildfire is right in the community's backyard. BC fire officials say their resources are focused on protecting the community, but they issued a warning Monday morning of the potential for strong winds to push the wildfire towards the town.
Those winds are going to be here for the next 48 hours, and it's really just about when they show up and how long they're going to last.
The more than 5,000-hectare human-caused fire grew fast since its discovery on Friday.
It was just surreal, chaotic, stressful.
Evacuees like Taylor Bain Takosa say they didn't expect to have to be prepared this early in the season.
We usually get a dump of snow on May 1. That's kind of tradition up here in the north.
As their waiting game gets more anxious because of the weather, those winds have pushed pollution from BC to Alberta. In Calgary, people woke up to thick smoke as crews in that province deal with their own fires.
Wildfire season did start early in Alberta. We did see drought-like conditions throughout the winter.
An evacuation order remains in place for several communities around Fort McMurray as an out-of-control wildfire nearly 20 kilometers southwest has grown to more than 5,500 hectares.
We made the kids pack a 3-day bag and then make sure we have all our important documents.
Back in BC, the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality Mayor is urging people to avoid the area.
Make sure that people are aware to stay away from northeastern British Columbia. It might look like a beautiful sunny day, but we're still at significant risk.
As communities grapple with uncertainty, fire officials in both provinces are reminding everyone to do their part in preventing more wildfires. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
A wildfire burning in Manitoba's north forced the evacuation of the entire community of Cranberry Portage. The wildfire began Thursday before the order to leave was issued on Saturday. The director of Manitoba's wildfire service says he's never seen anything like it.
It was moving about 2 kilometers an hour, and Cranberry was right in the way there. I've been working in wildfire for 40 years. I've never seen a fire move like this fire moved.
The director says the fire was caused by dry lightning, and while the soil is usually moist at this time of year, because of drought, the landscape is tinder dry. Firefighters from Ontario have arrived to help, joining crews from Saskatchewan. Fortunately, the fire, which is currently 31,500 hectares, has not grown since Saturday. Those wildfires have triggered air quality warnings across Western Canada. Smoke is blanketing northern BC, northern Alberta, the Northwest Territories, and Manitoba. It's also moving into Saskatchewan. Upper-level winds are actually driving the smoke down through the U.S. Midwest before moving east into Ontario and Quebec. The red zones show where air quality warnings are in effect as those out-of-control wildfires burn. Air quality is expected to fluctuate over the next few days due to wind direction and fire behavior and any rain that may fall. In New York, the hush money trial involving former U.S. President Donald Trump heard dramatic testimony from Trump's one-time lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen. Cohen described how Trump feared allegations of infidelity would hurt him in the 2016 election and laid out an alleged scheme to buy and suppress negative stories. As Jackson Prosco reports, Cohen testified the hush money deals were designed to keep Trump's name off the books.
Any messages for Donald Trump today?
He is the prosecution's star witness, the close confidant who turned on his former boss. On the stand, Michael Cohen laid out a scheme with the publisher of the National Enquirer to buy and suppress negative stories that could hurt Donald Trump's chances in the 2016 election. What I was doing was at the direction and for the benefit of Mr. Trump, Cohen testified when asked about one such alleged agreement involving former Playboy model Karen McDougal. The stakes of the so-called catch-and-kill deals grew even larger.
And when you were started, they let you do it.
After the infamous Access Hollywood tape dropped right before the 2016 election, Cohen says the campaign learned that Stormy Daniels was shopping her own story of an alleged affair with Trump. He testified Trump wanted to keep it quiet until after the election. He said to me, "This is a disaster, a total disaster. Women are going to hate me." When Cohen was asked about the $130,000 payment and the non-disclosure agreement with Daniels, he testified Trump reassured him. He stated to me, "Don't worry, you'll get the money back." Under oath, Cohen said everything required Mr. Trump's sign-off. After the non-disclosure agreement was signed, Cohen said he told Trump this matter is now completely under control and locked down.
We pay the lawyer a legal expense. When a legal expense is a legal expense.
Trump has insisted it was all above board. He denies the affair and has pleaded not guilty to all charges. In the coming days, the defense is expected to go after Cohen's credibility. He has previously admitted lying under oath and served jail time. That may not undo the damaging testimony delivered against the former president. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
Turning now to the situation in Gaza and the horrifying reality of war captured on camera. And a warning, some of the images you're about to see are very disturbing.
Mama,
Rescuers heard the cries of this child under the rubble of a building that was struck in northern Gaza over the weekend. Piece by piece, they removed the tiles that cover the child's face. The young girl calls for her mother, but she was killed in the airstrike. Meanwhile, in southern Gaza, the United Nations says one of its foreign security staff was killed and another worker injured when their vehicle was struck by Israeli gunfire. It's the first foreign UN staffer to be killed in Gaza since October 7th. Residents of the city say Israeli bombardments are intensifying ahead of a major military operation by the Israeli army. Redmond Shannon reports.
A United Nations vehicle reportedly hit by Israeli gunfire in Rafah, killing one international staff member and injuring another worker, the first foreign UN worker killed in Gaza since October 7th. People in Rafah say it is becoming even more dangerous. The UN says hundreds of thousands have now fled. Some are doing so for the third or fourth time.
Even the charity food is now gone. It is like we are escaping death for death.
Israel warns it will invade Rafah despite threats from Washington to withdraw some military support.
The thought of bombs leveling neighborhoods in Rafah where 1.3 million Palestinians have been displaced suggests that there is a massacre on the horizon.
Many have come to Deir al-Bala in central Gaza. It is relatively safe, as renewed fighting also rages around Jabalia camp in the north.
This water tank was barely enough for those who were already here. So what about those who have joined us?
UN figures show aid flow has slowed to a trickle in recent days after Israel took control of the Rafah crossing from Egypt. On Monday, a group of Israeli protesters blocked an aid truck heading for Gaza, trashing some of the aid. Memorial Day in Israel is normally a unifying occasion to honour troops and civilians killed in hostilities. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was heckled at one event, as was far-right Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. He is a criminal, yelled one woman. Despite broad support in Israel for its operation in Gaza, there remains division about how it is being executed. More than 7 months on, it's thought around 100 Israeli hostages are still alive somewhere inside the Strip. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
In Ukraine, Russian forces are intensifying their assault along the country's northeast border. Ukrainian police officers in the town of Vovchansk are helping residents flee, with Russian forces already at their doorstep. Thousands of civilians in the region are heading to the city of Kharkiv. The regional governor says Russian troops are trying to stretch the front line by attacking in several directions. Ukraine's army also admitted the Russians were achieving some tactical success, but reserve forces are being brought in to reinforce defenses. Tens of thousands of people are protesting in Georgia, taking to the streets of the capital, rallying against what they call Moscow's law. The legislation, which was just approved by the country's parliament, requires non-profits to register with the authorities if they receive more than a fifth of their funding from abroad. The Kremlin uses a similar tactic to crack down on independent news media and groups that are critical of the Russian government. The criminal trial of a key organizer of the so-called Freedom Convoy got underway in Ottawa today. Pat King pleaded not guilty to 9 charges against him related to that major protest that paralyzed downtown Ottawa 2 years ago over COVID-19 public health measures. Mackenzie Gray reports on what happened today and what to expect in the weeks to come.
A central figure of the convoy protests back in Ottawa, but this time for court. Just blocks from where the Crown alleges Pat King committed 9 offenses, including mischief and counseling others to commit intimidation, charges King pled not guilty to.
You could be looking at a very significant prison sentence of up to 10 years.
The Crown says they'll bring forward witnesses who live downtown during what they describe as an occupation, and use clips from King's frequent live streams during the convoy. Mischief was Mr. King's mandate, the Crown stated in court. While individuals are constitutionally entitled to express their views, regardless of whether those views are right or wrong, such constitutional protections are not limitless. King, a high-profile figure during the nearly month-long convoy in downtown Ottawa, had previously peddled the white nationalist Great Replacement conspiracy theory, and said this about the Prime Minister.
Trudeau, someone's gonna make you catch a bullet one day. To the rest of this government, someone's gonna do you in.
King also organized a slow roll of the Ottawa airport during the convoy, which the Crown says they plan to tie to his mischief charge. But his counsel argued he was not a central leader of the movement. There were many groups doing many different things, King's lawyer said, and ultimately, that will be something that I'm asking your honor to consider, vis-a-vis Mr. King's lack of involvement. Natasha Calvino also argued against the use of the term freedom convoy, preferring it be called a demonstration. But however you describe it, the court heard how it impacted 79-year-old downtown resident Victoria De Laurent, who said in her 30 years living downtown as a visually impaired person, she never experienced something as severe as what my experience was during the incident. It made me feel trapped and very worried for myself and others. King's legal team unsuccessfully attempted to get the case moved out of the capital, saying he was too notorious in Ottawa to get a fair trial, but the case is moving ahead, and it's expected to last 3 weeks. Carolyn?
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thanks. Standing their ground on campus. Coming up, the answers protesters are demanding from some Canadian universities.
Yango.
A chorus of boos and cheers ushered Jerry Seinfeld on stage at Duke University's graduation ceremony, with dozens of people walking out. The star comedian, who was the commencement speaker for the event, has been a vocal supporter of Israel and its military since Hamas's October 7th attack. Pro-Palestinian protests at universities have become widespread. A number of encampments at Canadian universities are still in place after several weeks. Protesters adamant on staying put until their demands are met. At the same time, patience is wearing thin for university administrators, who are now taking steps to take these camps apart. Mike Armstrong reports.
One of the newest student encampments to go up in Canada is less than a kilometre from the first. Just blocks from McGill University, Sunday students took over the quad at UQAM, the University of Quebec in Montreal. The other new encampment is at Dalhousie in Halifax. Students say their efforts at dialogue with the administration were turned down. The spokesperson says the camp is primarily in support of Palestinians, but not exclusively.
We want to know if our tuition money is going towards weapons, gas line pipes, anything that is upholding Western imperialism and settler colonialism.
McGill University was the first encampment to go up in Canada, April 27th. Since then, there have been 15. Only 2 camps have been dismantled so far, the University of Calgary and the University of Alberta in Edmonton. The president of that university, in a statement, says calling in the police was a tremendously difficult decision, but says the site was a fire hazard and there was a serious risk of violence. Now, those are some of the same arguments being made in Montreal. McGill University went to court Monday seeking an injunction to have its encampment shut down. It's arguing firefighters haven't been allowed in, tents are blocking an emergency exit from a building, and that sanitation is an issue.
Demonstrations are a way of informing the public.
This lawyer for one of the student groups says the burden of proving safety is an issue falls to the university. In its injunction request, McGill does admit Montreal police have pushed the administration to find a peaceful resolution and that the criteria for a police intervention have not been met. The judge's decision is expected Tuesday.
It's all or nothing for us. We want our demands.
At the University of Toronto, students promised Monday they're not moving. Among those speaking out were 2 people who say they're alumni and wanted to end their relationship with the university, tearing up their diplomas. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Deadly deluge ahead. Flash floods and cold lava flows wreak havoc in Indonesia. Search and rescue operations are underway in Indonesia after flash floods and mudslides killed 43 people this past weekend. Monsoon rains mixed with volcanic material from a nearby active volcano triggered cold lava flows that swept through villages, submerging more than 100 homes. More than 3,100 people have been displaced. Demolition crews in Baltimore have freed the Dolly container ship that felled the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Explosives were used to break down the final span of the bridge from the bow of the ship that rammed into it. It's a major step to clear the busy shipping channel. The bridge collapsed on March 26 after the Dolly lost power and crashed into a support column. 6 construction workers were killed. King Charles made a rare joint appearance with his son Prince William today. The King arrived at a British Army airfield to hand over a senior military role to the Prince of Wales. William becomes a Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps, a position held by Charles for 32 years. The visit was the King's latest engagement since he returned to public duties after an unspecified cancer diagnosis. William also took a break from official duties, spending time with his wife Catherine after her cancer diagnosis. Honoring heritage. Next, how Nova Scotians are celebrating their Gaelic roots. Every year during the month of May, Nova Scotians are encouraged to honor their province's history of Gaelic language, culture, and community. It all dates back centuries, and as Megan King reports, there's lots to celebrate about how New Scotland got its roots.
When in Nova Scotia, there's a palpable connection to Gaelic culture and identity. You only need to go as far as the province's name to know New Scotland.
Nova Scotia culture and Gaelic culture are intertwined and have been for over 250 years.
The provincial government, alongside many cultural groups, is working to preserve the minority language of Gaelic. With more than 500 students taking it as a subject in schools, and with roughly 2,000 speakers, Nova Scotia is one of the biggest Gaelic diasporas outside of Scotland.
The language and the culture were basically pressed in the public domain. They weren't given space. And so part of the renewal process is to encourage safe space for language and culture.
It's so encouraging to see the strength of that culture and how it's survived over the years.
Across the pond, Lisa Annette is part of a Scottish team that encourages interest in the language.
We have to do all we can to protect minority languages and minority cultures. For that reason, for the diversity of culture and the richness of culture and language, I think it's incredibly important. So it's great to see and hear about the efforts and the resource that's put into that in Nova Scotia.
Children are being encouraged to know the language as well through providing Gaelic translations on signs.
Like many Nova Scotians, I have Scottish heritage, and for the last few years I've been learning Gaelic, and this is an opportunity for me to share the language with visitors at the museum, but also it's an opportunity for young children to kind of hear the language, be introduced to the language.
With 1/3 of Nova Scotia's population descending from the early Gaels who emigrated in the 18th and 19th centuries, maintaining the Gaelic language is a way of fortifying cultural expression, often seen through songs, music, and a tradition of storytelling. Megan King, Global News, Halifax.
And that is Global National for this Monday night. I'm Carolyn Jarvis. Tonight's Your Canada are these baby birds in Victoria. We love seeing your Canada. Please email your photos to viewers@globalnational.com.
Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz. Jeff Bennett is on assignment. On the NewsHour tonight, Michael Cohen takes the stand in former President Trump's criminal hush money trial. Israel marks a somber Memorial Day as 300,000 Gazans flee the fighting in Rafah. And we report from Michigan on how Democrats plan to keep abortion rights front and center in the 2024 election campaign.
We're not going to let it just be a state issue. We're actually going to organize and mobilize to do the thing we didn't do for 50 years, which is pass a piece of federal legislation to codify Roe.
Like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. On the stand today for the fourth week of testimony in Donald Trump's hush money trial was the prosecution's star witness, Michael Cohen. Trump's former attorney and fixer implicated Trump, testifying that Trump directed Cohen to pay adult film actress Stormy Daniels to bury her story on the eve of the 2016 election and was then involved in the cover-up of those payments after he won. William Brangham was in court today in New York, and he joins us now. So, William, it's fair to say Mr. Cohen is arguably the most important witness for the Manhattan District Attorney in witness.
We'll see all that tomorrow, maybe Thursday as well.
All right, that is William Brangham reporting live from New York tonight. William, thank you. In the day's other headlines, the U.S. State Department says that Vladimir Putin's appointment of a new defense minister shows his desperation to sustain his invasion of Ukraine. On Sunday, Putin tapped a civilian economist to replace longtime ally Sergei Shoigu in the post. On the ground, Ukrainian officials say some Russian soldiers have advanced across the Kharkiv region. Farther south, Donetsk is also locked in combat. Meanwhile, across the Russian border in Belgorod, the death toll from a building collapse rose to 15 today. Russian officials blamed Ukrainian shelling. The death toll from ongoing flooding in Brazil has now risen to 147, with more than 100 people still missing and over 600,000 in the southern state of Rio Grande do Sul still displaced. The downpours have made rescues difficult and left many homes and businesses abandoned. Police patrol the flooded streets to prevent looting and robberies.
Since the first days of the floods, we've been patrolling and policing areas that are difficult to access. Only with boats and jet skis is it possible to provide a response in the fight against looting to the population here.
The heavy rains began in late April and have impacted over 2 million people across more than 400 cities. In Indonesia, officials say 44 people are confirmed dead after flash floods and landslides over the weekend. Monsoon rains on Sumatra Island sent torrents of mud and cold lava from a local volcano into a river, causing it to overflow. Rescuers combed through piles of mud and debris today to search for victims. 15 people are still missing. Smoke from wildfires in Canada prompted health warnings in parts of the upper Midwest. Authorities in Minnesota issued an air quality alert for the entire state and warned people to remain indoors until midday on Monday. A similar alert was issued for northwestern Wisconsin. Meanwhile, more than 3,000 people have evacuated Fort Nelson, British Columbia, as a fire nears the town. Fires are also burning in Alberta and Manitoba provinces. Activists are concerned over the whereabouts of a citizen journalist in China who was due to be released from prison today. Zhang Zhan was serving a 4-year sentence after documenting the first COVID lockdowns in the city of Wuhan in 2020. Monday marked the end of that sentence, but one of her lawyers told reporters that he hasn't heard from Zhang or her family. In Baltimore tonight, crews have carried out a controlled demolition of the largest remaining section of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. It's part of a process they call precision cutting. This allows the steel trusses resting on the Dali container ship to fall into the water. They'll then be loaded onto barges and carried away. Maryland Governor Wes Moore said during a press conference this morning that safety is his top priority.
We've gotten to this point without a single injury. We plan on continuing this mission without a single injury. That is the standard that we have going forward. The use of precision cuts will help us to preserve our strong safety record on this mission, and I want to remind everybody just how complicated this mission is.
The operation was set to begin on Sunday, but was pushed to today because of bad weather. A group of major U.S. airlines is suing the Department of Transportation over a rule requiring them to clearly disclose added fees. Officials say the regulations will help consumers avoid unexpected charges for baggage, flight changes, and other services. But in a statement, the airline said the Biden administration's, quote, attempt to regulate private business operations in a thriving marketplace is beyond its authority. Melinda French Gates is stepping down from the charitable foundation she created with her former husband, Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates. French Gates said that leaving would give her a, quote, additional $12.5 billion to commit to my work on behalf of women and families. The pair divorced in 2021 but continued their philanthropic work together. And we should note the Gates Foundation is a funder of the NewsHour. On Wall Street today, stocks closed with little change as investors wait for Wednesday's reading on inflation. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 81 points to close at 39,431. The Nasdaq rose 47 points, and the S&P 500 ended the day virtually flat. Still to come on the NewsHour, jury selection begins in the federal corruption trial of Senator Bob Menendez. Amy Walter and Tamara Keith break down the latest political headlines, advice for families on preventing online sextortion, and much more.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
The United Nations says that more than 360,000 Gazans who fled to Rafah have now been forced to flee again as Israeli troops attack sectors of the city in a bid to rout Hamas. Also in Rafah today, the first foreign UN staffer was killed by Israeli troops. More than 100 Palestinian UN staff have been killed since October 7th. Nick Schifrin has our report.
A city that's been teeming with the displaced is now...
And join us back here again tomorrow night for more on new White House steps targeting Chinese electric vehicles to protect American automakers. And that is the News Hour for tonight. I'm Amna Navaz. On behalf of the entire News Hour team, thank you for joining.
This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israel's intensifying its attacks across the Gaza Strip from Rafah to Jabalia, the largest refugee camp in Gaza. The official death toll has now topped 35,000, including more than 14,500 children. According to the United Nations, more than 360,000 Palestinians have fled Rafah, despite fears there's nowhere to go to escape the Israeli bombardment.
There's no safe place. The situation is very hard. There's no food, no drinks. Even the water is hard to get. My children cry and tell me, Mother, we want to drink. And I don't know what to do. I'm like everyone else who left Rafah and came here. And we are displaced here, but there's no safe place. The situation is really hard.
Palestinian health officials are warning the entire system in Gaza is hours from collapse due to a massive fuel shortage following Israel's seizure of the Rafah border crossing. Over the weekend, Israel ordered the forced evacuation of the Kuwaiti hospital in Rafah. Israel's attack on Rafah faces growing international condemnation. On Sunday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Israel should, quote, get out of Gaza, unquote. Meanwhile, Israel's advance on northern Gaza is forcing many displaced Palestinians in Gaza City to flee again.
What happened with us is that the Israeli forces dropped flyers on us to evacuate the camp as there will be strikes. We left the camp and we don't know where to go. We don't know where to head. We don't have food or drink or clothes. What do they want from us? They're killing us and our children. Shame on them. What shall we do? We're staying on the streets. This is just so unjust. Have some mercy on us. Arabs, Muslims, Americans. Have mercy on us. We're being slaughtered. Shame on you. We're all being killed. Shame on you. Why are you doing this to us?
Pro-Palestinian students staged protests at college graduations across the United States over the weekend. At Duke University, scores of students walked out of comedian Jerry Seinfeld's commencement address. At the University of California, Berkeley, Saturday's commencement ceremony was interrupted a number of times by students. A day earlier, at the UC Berkeley Law School commencement, 8 students wore shirts spelling out the phrase UC Divest. In other news from California, riot police made one arrest outside Pomona College's commencement, which was moved after students set up a Gaza Solidarity encampment on the main graduation stage. Meanwhile, at Virginia Commonwealth University, scores of students staged a silent Gaza walkout during Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin's commencement address.
Visitors, deans of the college's faculty, staff, family, and friends.
This comes as the police crackdown continues on student protests. On Friday, police raided an encampment at the University of Pennsylvania, arresting at least 33 protesters. In Cambridge, Massachusetts, police arrested 10 students who had relaunched an encampment at MIT. Police have now made nearly 3,000 arrests at student-led protests over the past month. Meanwhile, the trustees at the Union Theological Seminary, which is affiliated with Columbia University, have voted to divest from, quote, companies substantially and intractably benefiting from the war in Palestine, unquote. In related news, students at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore have ended their 2-week-old encampment after school officials agreed to consider divesting from Israel. On the international front, professors at the University of Amsterdam are staging a walkout today. This comes a week after police used a bulldozer to violently break up a student Gaza encampment. A new report by the U.S. State Department has concluded Israel likely used U.S. weapons in violation of U.S. and international law, but the report claims the Biden administration has not yet found specific instances that could force the U.S. to withhold military aid. The findings came in a report issued Friday to Congress. Former State Department official Josh Paul, who resigned over Biden's Gaza policy, criticized what he described as a self-contradictory report.
It does say that it is reasonable to assume that U.S. weapons have been used to commit violations of international humanitarian law, and yet it does not say that Israel has violated international humanitarian law. It does say that Israel has restricted humanitarian assistance into Gaza, and yet it says that currently Israel is not restricting U.S.-funded humanitarian assistance in Gaza, which is an absurd thing to say, given that the IDF is at this moment closing and has closed for several days the Rafah crossing point, which is the main entry point for humanitarian assistance.
The United Nations General Assembly voted 143-9 Friday in support of Palestine becoming a full UN member. 25 countries abstained from the vote. The United States and Israel both voted against the measure. The vote grants new rights and privileges to Palestine, but not full UN membership, which requires support from the UN Security Council. Last month, the U.S. vetoed a Palestine statehood resolution at the Security Council. On Friday, Palestinian Ambassador Riyad Mansour urged nations to support Palestine becoming a state.
A yes vote is a vote for Palestinian existence. It is not against any state, but it is against the attempts to deprive us of our state.
Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Gilad Erdan, protested the vote by shredding a copy of the UN Charter at the podium.
You are shredding the UN Charter with your own hands. Yes, that's what you're doing, shredding the UN Charter.
In another development, Egypt has announced it will join South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. 3 Israeli whistleblowers who worked at a military detention camp in the Negev desert have detailed to CNN horrific abuse faced by Gazans detained since October 7th. One whistleblower shared photographs that show Palestinians being strapped down, blindfolded, and held in diapers at the site. Doctors have been forced to amputate the limbs of some prisoners due to injuries sustained from constant handcuffing. One whistleblower said they beat Palestinians not to gather intelligence, but out of revenge. In other news from Israel, protests against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet are continuing as Israel marks its first Memorial Day since the October 7th attacks. Earlier today, relatives of dead soldiers heckled Israel's far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir as he spoke at a military cemetery. On Saturday, relatives of hostages held in Gaza staged another protest in Tel Aviv. Nama Weinberg is the cousin of Itay Sversky, who reportedly died in captivity.
It is because of Netanyahu that there is no hostage release deal and there are no hostages being brought back home. He is abandoning our families to their death for his own political interests. Entering Rafah and expanding the operations there are both hinder the hostages release negotiation and put the hostages' lives in grave danger. So long as Netanyahu is in power, the hostages will not return. He does not want them to return.
In other international news, Russian President Vladimir Putin has removed Sergei Shoigu from defense minister. Shoigu had served in the role since 2012 and had overseen Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He's being replaced by the economist Andrei Belousov. This comes as Russia says it's captured 9 more villages in Ukraine's Kharkiv region. In recent days, thousands of Ukrainians have evacuated their homes as Russia expands its attack near the city of Vovchansk. Meanwhile, at least 15 people died in the Russian city of Belgorod after a downed Ukrainian missile hit an apartment building. In Sudan, Doctors Without Borders says 2 children were killed and others injured overnight Sunday when a bomb fell outside a pediatric hospital in the western city of El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur. Also on Sunday were reports of another 27 deaths there as the Sudanese army clashed with the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, as fears mount of possible carnage in the last major stronghold of the army. Some 800,000 internally displaced people have taken refuge in El Fasher, which was once thought to be relatively shielded from the war. A Tunisian lawyers association has called for a nationwide strike after masked police officers raided Tunisia's Bar Association offices and arrested a prominent lawyer. Sonia Damani is an outspoken critic of the government of the Tunisian President Kais Saied and said in a TV interview last week half of Tunisia's youth want to leave Tunisia. She was being questioned about black African migrants who have been expelled from Tunisia. Damani's arrest was captured on a live French news broadcast as a reporter was covering her persecution by the government. 2 journalists were also arrested Saturday as part of the ongoing crackdown on dissent. On Sunday, protesters took to the streets of Tunis. This is Ahmed Najib Chebbi, head of the Opposition Alliance.
Today, people are being arrested for anything, absolutely anything. On top of all that, we are undermining the upcoming elections. Tunisia will be on the brink of crisis and collapse. Therefore, we advocate for holding the elections on the scheduled date, ensuring they are conducted within the framework of freedom and equal opportunity.
In Afghanistan, flash floods have killed at least 315 people in northern villages. Another 1,600 have been injured and thousands of homes have been destroyed or damaged, as have health facilities and essential infrastructure.
The flash floods destroyed our homes. I lost 13 members of my family, including women and children. So many livestock have been destroyed as well. We have no food, no drinking water, no shelter, no blankets, nothing at all. The floods have destroyed everything. Out of 42 houses, only 2 or 3 houses remained. The floods have destroyed the entire valley.
The affected area is in dire need of assistance, but Afghanistan has seen its international aid slash following the Taliban takeover in 2021. In Indonesia, flooding and mudslides in West Sumatra killed at least 43 people over the weekend, with over a dozen others missing. The monsoon downpours also triggered cold lava flow, a thick mixture of volcanic ash and other debris. In Canada, over 100 active wildfires are burning, prompting evacuation orders in British Columbia and Alberta. Authorities in Minnesota issued the state's first air quality alert of the year Sunday as wildfire smoke drifted across the border. In Spain, the ruling Socialist Party won a majority of seats in Catalan elections Sunday in a major upset for the region's separatist movement. If the Socialists can forge a ruling coalition with other parties, it'll be the first Catalan government in over a decade led by a party which does not support independence. Former President Donald Trump will be back in court today for the 4th week of witness testimony in his criminal hush money and election interference trial. Trump's former fixer, attorney Michael Cohen, is set to testify today. Meanwhile, the New York Times and ProPublica have revealed Trump could be forced to pay more than $100 million to the IRS for improperly claiming tax write-offs on a Chicago skyscraper by writing off the same losses twice. And jury selection begins today in the corruption trial of New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez. He's accused of taking bribes to benefit Egypt and Qatar. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.
Tonight, the dramatic showdown in Donald Trump's hush money trial. Michael Cohen testifying against his former boss. Mr. Trump's former fixer turned foe, Michael Cohen, taking the stand for his highly anticipated testimony, telling the jury Mr. Trump directed him to pay off Stormy Daniels to keep quiet about their alleged affair to protect his 2016 campaign. Cohen saying Mr. Trump told him, quote, just take care of it. The defense preparing to attack Cohen's credibility after calling him an admitted liar. And the secret tape Cohen made of Trump played for the jury. Also tonight, the race to escape Rafah. 360,000 people fleeing as Israeli forces advance on the southern Gaza city. Terrifying moments at a Louisiana church during a live stream service. A teen with a gun stopped as he tries to get into the building with 60 children inside for their first communion. Severe weather from Texas to Florida, we're tracking it. Wildfire smoke from Canada moving into the U.S. Air quality alerts in multiple states. Pro-Palestinian protests disrupting some graduations. Jerry Seinfeld's speech at Duke prompting dozens to walk out. Just in, the dramatic controlled demolition of a massive piece of Baltimore's collapsed bridge.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening and welcome. The prosecution case against Donald Trump nearing its crescendo in a New York courtroom tonight with the much anticipated testimony of former Trump lawyer and fixer Michael Cohen. Cohen describing his role in trying to bury.
Tonight, breaking news in Donald Trump's criminal trial, the key witness Michael Cohen on the stand and what he reveals. Also breaking, the controlled explosion, a huge part of the Baltimore bridge, comes crashing down just moments ago. You'll see it. First tonight, the high-stakes testimony in the criminal trial against Donald Trump. His former fixer, Michael Cohen, telling the jury that Trump said, just do it, when talking about paying Stormy Daniels for her silence. Michael Cohen saying he took out a home equity loan on his own home to pay for it. He says Trump promising to pay him back. The jury listening intently. Just a short time ago, the explosion, the demolition of that remainder of the bridge in Baltimore with the massive cargo ship still right there. And with the crew of that ship still on board 48 days later. The harrowing moments inside a church, dozens of families and children, a 16-year-old boy armed with a gun, interrupting mass, the priest ducking behind the altar. Tonight, the severe storms, possible tornadoes and damaging winds, Ginger's 8 with a new forecast. And now the smoke moving in from the fires in Canada yet again. The race for the White House tonight and President Biden taking aim at China, announcing major new tariffs, he says, to protect American industry and jobs. And tonight here, the new polls, where this race stands in the key battlegrounds, where Donald Trump is ahead. Overseas, the fierce fighting in northern Gaza tonight as Israeli forces also move deeper into the southern city of Rafah, and the American doctors trying to get out. Back in the U.S. tonight, authorities searching for a boater wanted for killing a 15-year-old girl while she was wakeboarding with friends in the water, the boater never stopping. In New York City tonight, the well-known actor Steve Buscemi randomly attacked while walking in Manhattan, what we now know about his case. Lighting up the skies over the U.S., the beautiful images tonight from viewers from Spokane, Washington, all the way to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and where you'll get another chance tonight. White Judge Judy is now suing the parent company of the National Enquirer and In Touch Weekly, and we remember a musician who famously performed with David Bowie and the Rolling Stones.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening. It's great to start another week with all of you at home. We do begin tonight with the high-stakes testimony in Donald Trump's criminal trial today. His former attorney and fixer, Michael Cohen, testifying Donald Trump told him to just do it when they were discussing paying Stormy Daniels for her silence. Cohen leaving his home this morning to face his former boss in court. Cohen then telling the court today that at Trump's direction, he helped make stories from women go away. And just weeks before the 2016 election, when the Access Hollywood tape came out, Cohen's surprising testimony today about what he says was Melania Trump's suggestion how to handle it. He says it was later used for damage control. Michael Cohen testifying he took out a home equity loan on his own home to pay Stormy Daniels and that Trump promised he would then pay Cohen back. Here's our senior investigative correspondent, Eric Petersky, leading us off at the courthouse tonight.
You have any message for Donald Trump today?
He once said he'd take a bullet for Donald Trump, but today Michael Cohen heading to court to testify against his old boss as the prosecution's star witness.
Had no evidence, and I'm innocent.
Inside, the two men who spent a decade attached at the hip didn't even look at each other. Cohen told the jury that as the 2016 campaign got underway, Trump warned him, be prepared. There's going to be a lot of women coming forward. The first, former Playboy model Karen McDougal. When Cohen informed Trump McDougal was shopping her story of their alleged affair, he said Trump responded, she's really beautiful. Make sure it doesn't get released. Trump has denied the affair, but Cohen testified that at Trump's direction, the National Enquirer bought McDougal's story. The jury heard the secretly recorded conversation, Trump and Cohen allegedly discussing the deal.
When it comes time for the financing, which will be, listen, we'll have to pay yourself.
As the election approached, the crises piled up. First, the Access Hollywood tape, Trump bragging about groping women.
When you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Cohen said Trump told him to spin at his locker room talk, words allegedly suggested by his wife Melania. Days later, Cohen testified he received word Stormy Daniels was trying to sell her story of a tryst with Trump. Cohen felt it would be catastrophic for the campaign, and he told the jury Trump agreed. He said to me, this is a disaster, a total disaster. Women will hate me. Guys may think it's cool, but this is going to be a disaster for the campaign. Cohen testified Trump ordered him to make sure the story didn't get out, saying, push it out past the election because if I win, it has no relevance, and if I lose, I don't even care. Cohen told the jury Trump didn't seem to care how it would affect his marriage, saying, how long do you think I'll be on the market for? Not long. He wasn't thinking about Melania, Cohen said. This was all about the campaign. Trump claims he never had sex with a porn star, but Cohen insisted Trump gave him clear directions, paid Daniels to keep quiet, saying there's no reason to keep this thing out there. Just do it. Cohen said he took out a home equity line of credit to cover the $130,000 payment and told Trump I was going to front the money for it, to which he was appreciative. He stated to me, don't worry about it, you'll get the money back. And Cohen testified he fully expected to be reimbursed, saying I would not lay out $130,000 for a non-disclosure agreement needed by somebody else. On the very day he wired the money to Daniels, 12 days before the election, he said he called Trump for final sign-off. I wanted to ensure that he approved what I was doing because I required approval from him on all of this, Cohen testified. Everything. On top of that, I wanted the money back. As soon as they got off the phone, Cohen said he walked across the street to the bank and wired the money. Jurors today seeing phone records showing the moment the call took place. Prosecutors said Trump did reimburse Cohen and illegally falsified business records to cover it all up by making it look like a legal expense. David, Cohen is the only witness who can affirmatively tie Trump to the crime, so his recollections about things Trump said are key. When it became evident Stormy Daniels was going to come forward, Cohen said Trump told him, just pay it, just do it. Cohen fronted the money. He said he fully expected to be paid back, and he took out a home equity line of credit, he said, so his own wife wouldn't find out. He told the jury she would not understand if $130,000 went missing from their joint bank account. David? Aaron Petersky leading us off tonight. Aaron, thank you. We turn now to the controlled explosion just a short time ago at the site of that massive and deadly bridge collapse in Baltimore. Look at the images tonight. It was late today. They demolished the remainder of the Francis Scott Key Bridge with that massive cargo ship still right there in the shadow of what was left of the bridge. And the crew of that ship still on board 48 days after the collision. Terry Moran on the scene again tonight.
Tonight in Baltimore, a spectacular feat of demolition engineering. Using scores of small precision explosives, crews cut apart the largest remaining section of the Key Bridge that crashed down on that cargo ship, the Dolly. Those giant steel trusses plunging into the water in a massive plume of smoke.
It's actually the safest and most efficient way to achieve this number of cuts and then have that wreckage fall out and away from the vessel.
That ship has been trapped ever since it rammed the bridge and brought it down nearly 2 months ago, killing 6 construction workers. For 48 days now, the ship's crew has remained on board, including during today's demolition.
They are necessary to keep the ship safe and operational. If something were to happen, they are in the best place to actually fight a fire on board the ship.
Authorities are now planning to move that ship and clear the remaining debris.
Was it a success? Yes, absolutely. It was an important step.
David, officials say they will move the Dolly back into the port of Baltimore within 48 hours and reopen the entire channel to all shipping by the end of the month. And David, during the weeks of this very dangerous salvage operation, not a single worker has been injured.
Terry Moran tonight. Terry, thank you for your continued reporting. We turn now to the harrowing moment inside a Louisiana church. Dozens of families and children were inside when a 16-year-old boy armed with a gun interrupted mass. The priest then ducking behind the altar. Here's ABC's Maria Villarreal tonight.
Tonight, this church livestream capturing chaos inside the sanctuary after a First Holy Communion ceremony was disrupted by a 16-year-old gunman. The incident unfolding on Saturday at St. Mary Magdalene Catholic Church in Abbeville, Louisiana. Dozens of families in attendance. Video showing a parishioner approaching the priest in the middle of Mass.
That this sacrament.
The priest then urging everyone to sit and join him in prayer. While the suspect never appears in the video, the church says he opened a back door, parishioners confronting him quickly and calling police. As officers race to the scene, panic erupting in the church, parents fleeing with their children.
Calm down and just get next to your child and go slowly.
Clergy crouching behind the altar. Tonight, authorities say there were no injuries reported and that 16-year-old suspect arrested and taken to a mental health facility for evaluation.
David, so far police have not released a motive in this case, but we do know the suspect is being charged with terrorizing and possession of a firearm by a juvenile. Meanwhile, the church says that they will continue to have uniformed police officers at all their future masses. David?
Maria Villarreal tonight. Maria, thank you. At this hour, we're tracking severe storms, possible tornadoes, damaging winds across several states. Also at this hour, air quality alert, smoke from more than 140 wildfires in Canada, drifting once again into the U.S. In fact, the Minneapolis skyline tonight barely visible. All of Minnesota in the red category, parts of Wisconsin and Iowa also on alert tonight. Let's get back to Chief Meteorologist Ginger Z tracking it all for us. Hi, Ginger.
Hi, David. We've got an ugly-looking line moving across southern Louisiana toward Baton Rouge. Lafayette going to get hit next. This has had embedded tornado warnings within it, and we just saw a severe thunderstorm watch pop up that includes New Orleans all the way to Pascagoula, Mississippi. So it's going to be a big night. Want to time it out for you? It's late night when it gets to New Orleans, especially south of Lake Pontchartrain. We're going to end up with some of those severe storms with winds in excess of 65 miles per hour. It marches right across the panhandle of Florida. Mobile, watch out tonight too, into the early morning hours, and then Charleston by 11 a.m. tomorrow. Let's talk smoke quickly because we've had air quality alerts now sink into Iowa, and that includes Fort Dodge, Mason City. But look what happens. It slides down into Topeka up to Sioux Falls. David, another night with smoke.
Dealing with it all over again. Ginger Z with us to start another week. Thanks, Ginger. Now to the race for president tonight and the new move from President Biden taking aim at China, announcing major new tariffs, he says, to protect American industry and jobs here. It does come amid new polls in the key battleground states that show Donald Trump leading President Biden in several of those states. Let's get right to our Chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, on this move when it comes to China tonight. And Mary also comes amid these new numbers.
It does, and David, the Biden campaign is certainly aware of these numbers. Donald Trump now leading President Biden in several critical battlegrounds among registered voters, including Arizona, Nevada, and Michigan, where manufacturing is key. Donald Trump leading there by 7 points. And tonight the president is trying to send a message on the economy that he, too, is tough on China. The president tomorrow expected to announce that he is quadrupling tariffs on electric vehicles from China from 25 to 100%. He's also targeting other imports like semiconductors, solar panels, and batteries. The president is vowing to protect American workers from foreign competition and is hoping to gain ground on the economy in the process. The issue also pivotal in states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, where those polls show Trump and Biden are much closer, David.
Mary Bruce with us tonight. Mary, thank you. Overseas tonight, there is fierce fighting now in northern Gaza as Israeli forces also move deeper into the southern city of Rafah. And tonight we have learned there are American doctors trying to get out. ABC's Marcus Moore from Tel Aviv.
Fierce battles in Gaza tonight as IDF troops fight to recapture a northern territory where they believe Hamas may have regrouped. The assault in the north, where aid groups say famine has taken hold, comes at the same time Israeli forces are expanding their operation in the southern city of Rafah. Images show tanks moving into the city, and new numbers reveal the staggering exodus of nearly 360,000 people fleeing the area since the first evacuation orders a week ago, many of them families. The White House, against any large-scale invasion of Rafah, is adamant Israel does not have a plan to protect the more than 1 million people there, even suggesting Israel has no exit strategy for this war.
If Israel's military efforts are not accompanied by a political plan for the future of Gaza, the terrorists will keep coming back, and Israel will remain under threat.
And David, there's word tonight that a number of American doctors and medical staff are stuck in Gaza because the Rafah crossing is closed. It's one of the many reasons the U.S. and other countries are urgently trying to get that crossing reopened. David.
All right, Marcus Moore in Tel Aviv for us again. Thank you, Marcus. There's also been a major move in the war in Ukraine. Russian forces attacking and now retaking some villages in the northeast. The warning tonight from President Zelensky about where this war stands now. And tonight, the major news from Moscow. Vladimir Putin has replaced the man who was running the war. ABC's James Longman back in Key for us tonight.
Tonight, Ukrainian forces are desperately trying to stop Russia's new offensive in the northeast, launching a drone strike on Russian troops taking cover along this tree line. But the bitter fighting leveling the town of Voloshansk, just 3 miles from the border. Rescue crews pulling out victims, thousands fleeing towards nearby Kharkiv. It's Ukraine's second largest city, now at risk. More than 1 million are still there. President Zelensky today with a stark warning. Russia is stretching Ukrainian forces thin, he says, with offensives on multiple fronts. Ukraine says some 50,000 Russian troops have been massing on the northeastern border for months, and that 30,000 are now deployed to fight. And pressure also building tonight in other key areas across the country, like Chasiv Yar in the east. We're at this community centre centre in July last year. Now look, almost completely destroyed. The new Russian onslaught comes as President Putin shocked Kremlin watchers by replacing his defense minister of 12 years, Sergei Shoigu. In his place, an economist with no military experience, possibly a signal of Putin's concern over Russia's troubled war economy. Vladimir Putin changing his defense minister suggests he knows his military is in bad need of modernization and improved economic efficiency. But it also shows his confidence. Russia is fully committed to this war. Putin knows the same. Cannot be said of the West. David?
James Longman, inside Ukraine for us tonight. James, thank you. Back here in the U.S. tonight, authorities in Florida are searching for a boater who was wanted for killing a 15-year-old girl while she was wakeboarding with friends. She was floating in the water. Authorities say the boater hit her and never stopped. Victor Akendo in Florida.
Tonight, the search for a South Florida boater wanted for killing a 15-year-old girl on the water. Authorities say Ella Adler was wakeboarding with friends off the coast of Key Biscayne Saturday afternoon. She was in the water with the board attached to her feet when she was fatally struck by a passing boater who never stopped to help.
We're hoping that somebody saw something and would come forward with some information.
Witnesses describing the boat as light blue, center console, with 2 to 4 outboard engines. Her family sharing this video of Adler, a talented ballerina, saying the world lost a star this weekend. Ella was beautiful and shined brightly. In her 15 years, she gave us more light than we could have ever dreamed. Today, loved ones gathering for her funeral. Lauren Pearson says his daughter was best friends with Adler.
Yeah, it's a tremendous loss. She had such a bright future. Yeah, very sad.
Authorities are asking for the public's help. A reward of up to $20,000 is being offered for information leading to an arrest. David?
All right, thank you, Victor. When we come back here tonight in New York City, the well-known actor Steve Buscemi randomly attacked by walking in Manhattan, but we now know about the case. And we remember a Grammy-winning musician who performed with the Rolling Stones, David Bowie, Bruce Springsteen, in a moment. Tonight in New York City, actor Steve Buscemi is recovering after he says he was randomly attacked on a New York City street. He was seen back at work with injuries on his face. He says he was repeatedly punched while walking on 3rd Avenue and 27th Street in Midtown Manhattan. Police tonight releasing surveillance images of the suspect. No arrests have been made. Tonight, Judge Judy Scheinlein filing a lawsuit against the parent company of the National Enquirer and In Touch Weekly, accusing the company of defamation. She says they published a story falsely claiming she was trying to help the Menendez brothers get a retrial nearly 35 years after their parents' murder. She calls the story a fabrication. No comment tonight from the publisher, Accelerate 360 Media. When we come back here tonight, remembering a Grammy-winning sax player who famously performed with the Stones and so many others, and then a stunning display in the skies across America. Your images, right here in a moment. To be next tonight, we learned today that Grammy-winning saxophonist David Sanborn has died, famously performing Young Americans with David Bowie on the Dick Cavett Show in '74. He had been battling prostate cancer for several years. He performed rock and jazz with Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel, Stevie Wonder. David Sanborn was 78. When we come back here tonight, where you're going to get another chance this evening, and the images you've sent in already here, the Northern Lights over America. Finally tonight here, what a show. Tonight, another chance for millions. A rare glimpse of the spectacular Northern Lights.
Wow.
NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Association, says the skies over Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Maine, and upstate New York all tonight could see those lights again in the overnight hours. Your best chance if it's clear, around 3 a.m. All weekend long, so many of you witnessing the lights. These spectacular images from Spokane, Washington, to Storm Lake, Iowa, Wendover, Utah, to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, the strongest solar storm in more than 20 years to reach Earth. Time-lapse video highlighting the remarkable display. York, Maine, the Neville Lighthouse, the green sky there dancing above it. And right here tonight.
Good evening, David, and welcome to Maine.
Photographer Rob Wright, one of the many who captured incredible images, taking us back to that lighthouse.
Just witnessing it in person, it is more vivid, dynamic, detailed. It was a night I would never, ever forget.
But we love it. Good luck tonight. Let us know if you see it. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Thank you for making World News Tonight with David Muir, America's most watched newscast.
Getting messages for Donald Trump today?
The prosecution's key witness takes the stand in Donald Trump's so-called hush money trial.
Is there anything you can say that could put you in jeopardy?
Michael Cohen ties his old boss directly to hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. Why he says the former president was afraid the adult film star's story would be a disaster for his 2016 campaign.
Pay a lawyer, a legal expense. It's marked down in the book.
The CBS Evening News starts now. Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for being with us after a pivotal day in the criminal trial of Donald Trump, the former president coming face-to-face with his one-time personal attorney, Michael Cohen, who gave 6 hours of detailed testimony under oath, painting a behind-the-scenes picture of what was happening in the final weeks of the 2016 campaign. The former fixer and inside man detailed how Trump personally approved the so-called hush money payouts to hide stories that he believed would hurt him with female voters in his 2016 run for the White House. It was the Stormy Daniels payment and Trump's reimbursement to Cohen, disguised as legal expenses, that is at the heart of this criminal case. Trump is charged with 34 felony counts of falsifying business records to conceal that information from voters. And reporters in the room say Trump spent much of the day in court with his eyes closed. CBS's Robert Costa was there for today's riveting testimony and reports tonight on a secret recording between Cohen and Trump that the jury heard just today.
What do you have to say about Trump?
Michael Cohen left early this morning for what would be a blockbuster day in court, where he testified.
Here now with more. Former President Trump's legal spokesperson, Alina Hobb, is with us. Right, you've been in the courtroom, you've been there today. By the way, is it common for lawyers to tape their clients like this? I don't know. I thought that was highly unusual, but maybe that's me. And highly unethical on top of everything else. Let's get your take on what happened today. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Last time I checked, there's something called attorney-client privilege. Obviously, that doesn't stand if you're going against Donald Trump, because none of the rules stand if you're going against Donald Trump in a political campaign where he's winning, and they have no other way to win but to take him down with illegal and politically motivated lawfare. You said it best, Sean. Hillary Clinton did something far worse, and the FEC looked at it, they examined it, and what they do, they gave her a slap on the wrist. She paid, I think, $8,000 for hiding a dirty dossier, the Russian hoax against Donald Trump, and nobody cared about anything. She wasn't dragged into court. Neither was Bill Clinton in the sock drawer case, and the list goes on and on and on. But if you're Donald Trump, you're going to be gagged unconstitutionally so that you can't even discuss testimony of people that are calling you a liar, and you can't defend yourself. Can I tell you, Sean, I have never seen anything worse than what I saw today. I'm not going to get into the testimony of somebody under oath on the witness stand, but I think that if you read the news, it speaks for itself.
You know, if you look at Russia, that was 3 years, Alina. I covered it on this program. We got everything right. The mob, the media, they got everything wrong. Then, of course, not one, but two impeachments. Then it's January 6th. Then it's charge him in New York, charge him in D.C., charge him in Fulton County, Georgia, charge him down in Florida. And we're learning more and more that there are tainted evidence issues in two of the cases, according to one report in the Epoch Times today. And I'm just wondering, are they not noticing the American people in poll after poll are seeing through this, that they have done the impossible? How do you turn Donald Trump into a victim? How do you turn the American people are so turned off by this that people maybe that didn't even like Donald Trump have had it? They're finished with this. They see this for what it is on top of all the failures of the Biden administration. This is boomeranging big time in my view.
100%. What I saw today, D.A. Bragg showed up again for the morning. It's something I saw myself with Miss James, another one that's been bought by the DNC, paid for by many of the biggest Democrat donors that are buying the same tents that we're seeing in colleges right now and setting up all of this. I mean, this is political in and out. In our schools, in our courts, in our country is at stake. And I think the reason you're seeing all of these independents turn, and we're at the highest level right now of independents turning towards Republicans, is because they are seeing the dual system of justice. And as President Trump says, he's just in the way. This can turn to you, it can turn to me, it can turn to our children. And that's what they're doing. They're indoctrinating, they're corrupting, and they're throwing out the American Constitution that our country was made on. It is completely out the window. It's so sad to see, Sean. It has to stop.
It has to stop. All right, Alina Habba, thank you. We appreciate you being with us. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
The US says it's doing everything to speed up delivery of weapons to Ukraine after Russia's surprise ground offensive in Kharkiv in the northeast. Several small villagers have been captured with fierce fighting around the key town of Vovchansk. Donald Trump's one-time fixer testifies in the former US president's hush money trial in New York, Michael Cohen, giving details about how the then Republican candidate directed him to pay porn actress Stormy Daniels to bury her claims she'd had sex with him. And Israel steps up attacks across Gaza with intense fighting in some northern areas, which Israel said had been cleared of Hamas fighters. Shelling and strikes also in Rafah in the south, where the UN says its first foreign staff member has been killed. Thanks very much for joining us here on the France 24 and Night Watch. First up, the United States says it's doing everything it can to rush weapons to Ukraine after Russia launched a surprise ground offensive on the border region of Kharkiv. Recently appointed security chief Alexander Litvinenko said Moscow was trying to exploit Ukraine's weaknesses before a next batch of military aid arrives. Tens of thousands of Russian troops have crossed the border since Friday and captured several small villages. There's fierce fighting around the key town of Vovchansk, where nearly 6,000 people have been evacuated. France 24's Emmanuel Shaz has this latest from Kharkiv.
The situation is still very tense, very difficult for Ukrainian soldiers. There's over 30 settlements where there's a fierce fighting ongoing. There's been a change of command on the Ukrainian side that also shows us just how dire the situation is. And let's not forget that while this fighting is ongoing between the two armies, where people are trapped in the middle and those people are the civilians still living in those settlements. There's been a lot of people who had left already. The government, the authorities had asked families to leave some of the settlements during the past few weeks, but this rapid advance by Russia still managed to take by surprise thousands of civilians who have been evacuated over the past couple of days. It was early this morning, it was over 6,000 people had already been evacuated. I've seen hundreds of them today at the reception center here in Kharkiv, and for them the situation is very dire. They have lost everything, and they've lost everything under a fire, constant Russian fire, with all sorts of bombs, shelling being thrown at them, as some of the people have told me this afternoon. So the situation very complicated on the front line, with in the middle the civilians paying the price of this fighting.
That was Emmanuel Shaz in Kharkiv there. Next to Georgia, where the Prime Minister has vowed to push his controversial foreign influence bill through Parliament this Tuesday, as mass protests continue against it. The legislation targets NGOs and media groups which receive over a fifth of their funding from abroad. The government says it's needed to stop foreign meddling. Critics say it's modelled on Russian legislation used to crush dissent. France 24's Noam Beshneker has more.
After a month of tensions and mass protests, Georgia's Prime Minister vowed to push the controversial foreign influence bill through Parliament, calling it a matter of national sovereignty.
If we back down to external pressure now, there'll be more pressure in the future to abandon our family values, to pass same-sex legislation, to legalise drugs, and uncontrolled immigration. Tomorrow the Parliament of Georgia will act on the will of the majority and pass the bill in its third reading.
The announcement came as thousands of people took to the streets of the capital to protest against what they've dubbed the Russian law. The bill will require media outlets and advocacy groups that receive more than 20% of their funding from abroad to register as pursuing the interests of a foreign power, and critics say it mimics similar legislation used in Russia to silence dissent. For the past month, Georgia has been gripped by near-daily mass protests against the bill, which many people fear could derail the country's EU membership bid. On Monday, students walked out of universities to gather outside Parliament, where a judiciary committee formally approved the bill in just over a minute.
It's not even dystopian anymore. When they are passing a law in around 60 to 70 seconds, it's absurd. It makes me angry, and all these people are angry just because of that. We are going to continue protesting.
The bill will now become law if approved by MPs in its third and final reading on Tuesday, but protesters were determined to keep up the pressure and vowed they would be back in the morning.
Next up, the main prosecution witness in Donald Trump's hush money trial has taken the stand in New York. Michael Cohen, the ex-president's one-time fixer, testified that in 2016, the then Republican presidential candidate directed him to pay porn actress Stormy Daniels to bury her claims that she'd had sex with him before it could derail his campaign. Jessica Lemazurier is following the case for France 24 in New York.
Listening to Michael Cohen's testimony this Monday from the courtroom was at times like hearing the inner workings of the mob. Cohen described a plan to pay former porn star Stormy Daniels to stay quiet about her alleged sexual liaison with Trump in great detail, and each point was supported by phone logs and bank statements. Some court reporters had binoculars with them to be able to closely view each of these documents as they were presented on a screen as evidence. Now, Cohen said that he called Trump twice to get the sign-off right before opening an account at New Republic Bank on October 26, 2016, and this account was used in the transfer, he said, of the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels. But would you have made that payment to Stormy Daniels without getting a sign-off from Trump? The prosecution asked Cohen. No, he said, because everything he said required Mr. Trump's sign-off, and on top of that, I wanted to get the money back. Well, Cohen's testimony appeared to build on and corroborate testimony given by other witnesses in this trial. There were also some amusing moments, including details of from Cohen about how he hid this hush money payment from his wife. Now, perhaps the most important part of Cohen's testimony, however, was when he said that Trump personally participated in a meeting at Trump Tower in 2017 in which he approved a plan to reimburse Cohen for the money that he paid Stormy Daniels. The prosecution has not yet finished questioning Cohen. That's going to continue on Tuesday, and after that, it will be the turn of Trump's lawyers, who will try to convince the jury that Trump didn't know anything about these hush money payments. They will also do their best to present Cohen as a liar. But even if Cohen has a history of lying, with all of this evidence shown today on Monday, Trump's lawyers are really going to have their work cut out for them.
Staying in the US, demolition crews have set off a chain of precision explosions to remove what's left of a collapsed Baltimore bridge from a container ship to free up the port. 6 people were killed when the Francis Scott Key Bridge was brought down by the Dali ship, which crashed into it on the 26th of March. The accident halted most maritime traffic through Baltimore's busy port, which has impacted thousands of longshoremen, truckers, and small business owners since the accident. Now to the Middle East, and Israel has stepped up attacks across Gaza with some of the most intense fighting reported in weeks. In the north, tanks moved back into some areas which Israel had previously declared cleared of Hamas fighters. In the southern city of Rafah, helicopter strikes and heavy shelling was reported. Several of Israel's allies, including the US, have warned against an assault on Rafah, where over 1 million displaced Palestinians are seeking shelter. And on Monday, a United Nations staff member was killed in a strike in eastern Rafah, reportedly the first foreign UN casualty in the 7-month war. Antonia Kerrigan has this update.
Smoke rose above eastern Rafah as an already displaced population flees an intensifying ground operation. Hundreds of thousands have left the city once dubbed a refuge in the last week.
There are stray cats and dogs left in the streets, but not people. People are fleeing. The streets are terrifying. The sound of fighter jets is appalling.
I'll head to Al-Mawasi in Han Yunis. The Israeli army might instruct us to evacuate somewhere else afterwards. We're exhausted.
And while Israel pushes ahead into Rafah, defying international outcry, in a move they once claimed will be the final indispensable step towards defeating Hamas, its number one ally has not only condemned the lack of any credible plan to protect civilians, but has also rarely been so scathing about Israeli strategy.
We're seeing parts of Gaza that Israel has cleared of Hamas, where Hamas is coming back. As we look at Rafah, they may go in and have some initial success, but potentially at an incredibly high cost to civilians, but one that is not durable.
Adding that Israel will be left holding the bag on an enduring insurgency. Indeed, Israeli tanks were seen on Monday in the northern town of Jabalia, once again subject to heavy shelling, even though the IDF claimed to have successfully dismantled Hamas in the area in January. And as the fighting returns, so too do the evacuation orders.
We don't know where to go. We've been displaced from one place to the next, and now we've left. We don't know where to go. We are running in the streets. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw the tank and the bulldozer. It's on that street.
The United Nations continue to call for an immediate ceasefire, but talks have reached a standstill between Israel and Hamas.
Israel has been observing its annual Memorial Day dedicated to fallen soldiers and civilian victims of terrorism. Ceremonies were held in Jerusalem to mark the day, with the usually somber occasion very much focused on Hamas's 7th of October attacks and the war in Gaza. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed once again to defeat Hamas and to secure the return of the remaining 130 hostages from Gaza, around 30 of whom are believed to be dead. And finally, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has told the Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis that there are no unsolvable problems between the two neighbours. This at talks in Ankara. The meeting is the latest in a series of key steps to improve ties between the historic foes. Caught up in the centuries of rivalry, Turkish citizens of Greek origin, known as the last Byzantines, numbered around 350,000 at the beginning of the 20th century. Now, they are estimated to be fewer than 1,500 in Istanbul. Our team went to meet some of this disappearing community.
Bartholomew I is the Patriarch of Constantinople. The Orthodox Church he leads was founded in the 4th century, and the Byzantines ruled over what is now Istanbul. But today, this community is on the brink of extinction. The Greek presence in Istanbul can still be seen in its buildings, but most people are gone. Many of them left in a forced population exchange between Greece and Turkey in 1923. Those who remained were largely driven out by subsequent pogroms. As a result, in the past 100 years, the Greek population here has dropped from 350,000 to only 1,500. Such a decline is hard to counter, says this Greek community leader.
The past was very difficult. People in the 70s, 60s, probably in the 50s, they left because they thought they no longer had a future here. Now things have changed. Our youth doesn't want to leave Istanbul, but for sure, with such a low number of people remaining, it's hard to see a future.
We used to be 5, now it's just 1.
Minas Vassiliadis runs the one-man bureau of Apoya Matini, Turkey's last Greek newspaper, founded in Istanbul in 1925.
It's not just a newspaper that is meant to deliver news. It acts in the same time as an archive, as a chronicle, as a glue that keeps the Greek community connected because the newspaper is published in Greek.
The paper sells 200 copies a day. Its revenue goes entirely to iTouch, the delivery man. He has his fixed customers, like this Greek school, but his route is getting shorter by the year.
There's only the elderly left. Young people don't read anymore. That's why we print only 200 newspapers, not as much as before. The numbers are falling and they will continue to fall.
But this editor-in-chief is not ready to give up.
For my part, I'm putting all my energy into this newspaper. That's my only goal right now, and as long as I have the strength, it will continue to be.
Report by Janelle Rocha Kukli and Madeline Ingleby. That's it for the moment here on France 24. Please do it.
Hello and welcome to... That's going to be difficult. Stay in the car, Austin.
Austin starts Sunday, June 9 on ABC and ABC iView. Today, promises of cost of living relief in tonight's federal budget, including on energy bills.
We know that people are doing it tough, and that's why there's more help on the way in this budget.
New South Wales to make it harder for serious domestic violence offenders to get bail. Intense fighting in Ukraine as Russian forces advance near Kharkiv in the country's northeast. And calls for more typing lessons after Year 2 students are found to be better at writing than using a keyboard. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ros Childs. The federal government is forecasting a surplus of $9.3 billion for this financial year ahead of this evening's budget. If it's delivered, it'll mark a more than $10 billion improvement on December's forecast. The budget will also reveal bigger than anticipated deficits for the next 3 years due to what the government calls unavoidable spending. Political reporter Tom Lowry joins us now from Parliament House in Canberra. Hi there, Tom. So how significant is a second straight surplus?
Yeah, good afternoon, Ros. The government's been keen to point to one stat in particular, that is that this is what we'll be looking at for throughout this afternoon.
Tom, thanks. To some breaking news now, and former military lawyer David McBride has been sentenced to 5 years and 8 months jail in the ACT Supreme Court for sharing classified military documents with journalists. McBride pleaded guilty to 3 charges, including theft and sharing more than 200 documents classified as secret with members of the press. Justice David Mossop rejected Mr McBride's case that he didn't believe he was breaking the law and found the offences were aggravated by his high security rating, which gave him access to the materials. The material released by Mr McBride was used in the ABC's Afghan files, which revealed allegations Australian soldiers were involved in illegal killings. McBride will serve a non-parole period of 2 years and 3 months. That news just in. We'll have more on this with our reporter Elizabeth Byrne shortly. Let's go back to the budget now, and many households will want the Treasurer to deliver a reprieve to the rising cost of living. Whether you're a renter, paying off a mortgage or keeping your car on the road, costs are on the rise. Our reporter Fiona Blackwood takes a look at how some households are trying to make ends meet. Right across the country, households are under financial pressure. On the Tasman Peninsula, Claire Bond's mortgage chews up more than half her income.
If the interest rates keep going up, I probably will lose everything. It's actually quite scary. Yeah.
On a part-time wage and part pension, the 63-year-old is struggling with everyday expenses.
You skip meals. And you tend to eat a lot of that, even though you shouldn't.
She's been hoping for more support for pensioners and welfare recipients.
The wealthy are getting wealthier and the poor are getting poorer.
And disposable income has continued to fall, leaving many hoping this federal budget will help shape a more financially comfortable future. Fiona Blackwood, ABC News.
And of course, the ABC will have extensive coverage and analysis of the budget and what it means for you. It all starts tonight at 7:30pm with the Treasurer's speech. Directly after that, Sarah Ferguson will interview the Treasurer and Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor. Then David Spears hosts a special edition of Insiders, followed by analysis with The Business. The New South Wales Government is introducing sweeping changes to make it harder for people accused of serious domestic violence to get bail. Legislation being introduced today will reverse the presumption of bail for those accused of a range of serious domestic violence offences and see those who are granted bail made to wear electronic monitoring bracelets. Reporter Sarah Garrity joins us live now from outside State Parliament. So Sarah, can you take us through these changes?
Well, Ros, these changes are designed to better protect the victims of domestic violence and address the problem of people who've been accused of serious domestic violence offences then committing new crimes while out on bail. What it will mean is that soon people charged with the most serious domestic violence offences, including things like sexual assault, some forms of strangulation, kidnapping, as well as coercive control, will soon have to show cause as to why they should not be kept in custody on remand, as opposed to the onus being on the prosecution to prove why they should be. Now, currently, that high threshold is only reserved for the most serious of crimes, so things like murder, child sexual assault, but soon, after this legislation is passed through the New South Wales Parliament, those people charged with the most serious serious domestic violence offences will also be added to that list. Now, for those who are granted bail, they will be subject to electronic monitoring, although at this stage, the Premier, Chris Minns, says exactly how that will work, whether or not victims will be alerted if somebody breaks the conditions of their bail, is yet to be worked out, and he says that will take some time to work through those details.
The system doesn't currently work in any jurisdiction other than in a trial phase, and as a result, in Australia's largest jurisdiction, we have to stand it up. It also needs to be remembered, however, that the vast majority of the proposed legislative changes that we
to make bail decisions for people charged with domestic violence offences, including on weekends, those decisions will have to be made by a magistrate. And magistrates will also have to consider red flag behaviour, so things like stalking or animal cruelty in their decisions, as well as take into consideration the views and thoughts of victims and their families, Ros.
So these changes come after a string of high-profile domestic violence cases, including the death of Forbes woman Molly Tysers last month. What's been the reaction to the government's announcement?
Well, the Attorney General, Michael Daly, says he had a phone call with Molly Tysers' father yesterday, and that it was a very sad but respectful conversation where her father welcomed these changes and was grateful that they were being introduced. It was Molly Tysers' death which has really set in motion this series of reforms, but there, of course, has been a real spotlight on the domestic violence incident since that death as well, so the public outcry over this issue has been mounting. Now, in response to the announcements today, domestic violence advocates have broadly welcomed them. They have expressed some concern about how they'll operate in practice, particularly the issues of ankle monitoring. They say that really that should not be seen as a substitute for keeping people in custody on remand. However, they're also saying that bail laws and bail reforms are good, but there needs to be broader changes, more funding, and that simply changing the bail laws is not going to be the silver bullet for this problem.
Sarah, thank you. Tasmania's Parliament is back in session today after a 5-month-long summer break and a state election that delivered a minority government. Reporter Adam Langenberg joins us now from outside State Parliament House. Hi, Adam. So who's been sworn in as the Speaker of the House?
Hi, Rods. A minority Liberal government was elected at March's state election, but in a bit of a turn-up, a Labor MP, Michelle O'Byrne, has been elected as Speaker and not the government's choice. Now, Mark Shelton had been the Speaker of Tasmania's House of Assembly since 2021. He's a Liberal MP from the sprawling electorate of Lyons, and the Liberals had wanted to give him another term as Speaker. But all of the crossbenchers indicated they supported Labor's Michelle O'Byrne, who's been in state parliament since work, with the government needing the support of at least 4 other MPs to get any legislation passed downstairs in the lower house.
Thanks, Adam. Just returning to our breaking news now, and former military lawyer David McBride has been sentenced to 5 years and 8 months jail in the ACT Supreme Court for sharing classified military documents with journalists. McBride pleaded guilty to 3 charges, including theft and sharing more than 200 documents classified as secret with members of the press. Elizabeth Byrne has the latest from outside court. Good afternoon, Liz. So tell us more about what happened there.
Well, we've had a very long judgment in the court today where the judge outlined his findings about the arguments put in favour and against Mr McBride going to jail. You'll remember he pleaded guilty to the 3 charges and he was given a 10% discount for that plea, but the judge rejected assertions like, for instance, that he left yet to go to campus prison, but I guess that must be imminent.
Elizabeth, thank you. Federal politicians are demanding to see agreements between the Australian Federal Police and China's security agencies following revelations last night on Four Corners. The Chinese police escorted an Australian resident back to China. Investigative journalist Echo Hoy is with me in the studio. You were the author of that report on Four Corners last night. Echo, so your investigation reveals more than 280 cases of foreign citizens, residents being repatriated to China. What are the more troubling cases here?
So one of the most troubling cases really is this woman, which the Australian Federal Police has allowed the Chinese police officer to come and talk to her in 2019. And then the Chinese officer then went on to take her back to China without the knowledge or permission of any Australian authority. And that's just one of the 16 successful repatriation from Australia to China. And Nora Ha from international NGO Safeguard Defender says that we have a sovereignty issue here. For the PRC to launch these illegal operations, undeclared to the Australian government, to the Australian authorities, going on people, after people on Australian soil, is clearly in violation and breaks government to infiltrate parliament, infiltrate politics, and steal secrets is also very concerning.
Thanks, Echo. The United Nations says one of its staff members has been killed and another injured after their vehicle was fired upon in Gaza. Middle East correspondent Eric Torchek reports.
UN sources have told us that one man from India was killed and his colleague from Jordan was injured when their marked vehicle was fired upon in the southern border city of Rafah. The UN Secretary-General says the pair worked for the UN Department of Safety and Security and they were on their way to the European hospital in Rafah. He's called for an investigation and also for humanitarian workers to be protected and for a ceasefire and the release of hostages inside Gaza. It's not clear who fired upon the car, but what we do know is that there are battles in Rafah between Palestinian militants.
Feared with. We have raised this incident with the government of Israel and we expect them to take appropriate action.
Meanwhile, pro-Palestinian protesters have attempted to disrupt a Jewish event at Melbourne's Monash University as dozens of police stood guard outside. Sign Valence has more from the campus.
Around 100 pro-Palestine protesters clashed with police and attendees of an event here at Monash University to mark Israeli Memorial Day. Police say there were around 1,000 people at the event, which commemorates lives lost to terrorism and members of the IDF who have died in war. There was a strong police and private security presence at the event because the university knew the protesters did plan to disrupt it. Some people were asked to move on, but there was no violence and no arrests were made. Monash University says it's been liaising with police and its top priority is the safety of students, staff and the community. Of course, there is a pro-Palestine encampment here at Monash and at many other universities around the country, and it's not the first time police have been called to step in, including earlier this month at Monash, where mostly non-students from both sides came and clashed, but there were no arrests then either. Tensions, however, have been simmering, and they have led to accusations of anti-Semitism on campus. That is something the pro-Palestine protesters strongly deny.
And students at a pro-Palestinian encampment at Deakin University in Melbourne South East have been told to immediately dismantle the camp. An email from the university's Deputy Vice-Chancellor says the encampment, which was set up a week ago, compromises safety, security and amenity of all campus users. On to international news now, or more international news. A star prosecution witness in Donald Trump's criminal trial in New York has taken the stand, directly implicating his former boss in a hush money scheme to bury negative stories ahead of the 2016 US presidential election. Michael Cohen was the former president's personal lawyer and fixer and once said he'd take a bullet for Donald Trump. Now he's turned foe. In court, Mr. Cohen told jurors Mr. Trump personally signed off on a $200,000 payment made to porn star Stormy Daniels to stay quiet about a sexual encounter she alleged she had with him a decade earlier, something that Mr. Trump denies. The payment is at the centre of the historic first criminal trial of a former president. Prosecutors allege Mr. Trump paid his loyal staffer back after the election and hid the reimbursement by recording it falsely as a legal retainer fee in his real estate company's records. Mr. Trump has pleaded not guilty to 34 counts of fraud. He says the case is politically motivated to damage his political chances in this year's presidential election.
This trial is rigged. It's dishonest. It's a disgrace to New York. It's a disgrace to the country. I should be out campaigning now instead of sitting in a very cold courthouse all day long. This is a Biden prosecution. It's election interference at a level that nobody in this country has ever seen before. This is for third world countries, not for the USA.
Michael Cohen has spent time in jail. In 2018, he pleaded guilty to federal charges that he violated campaign finance law, in part through the payments he made to Stormy Daniels. And later that year, he also entered a guilty plea for lying to Congress in 2017 that says he did so to protect Donald Trump. Michael Cohen has been vocal against his former boss on social media. In one recent post, he wore a shirt with an image depicting Donald Trump behind bars.
And as I say in the last line of my book, Trumpism is fascism, and we must eradicate it from our body politic.
Michael Cohen will face another round of questioning by the prosecution when the trial resumes, before being cross-examined by defence lawyers who are expected to focus on the credibility of the witness. While Donald Trump is gagged from commenting on witnesses, his political allies are rallying behind him and speaking out about the former fixer's testimony.
This guy is a convicted felon who admitted in his testimony that he secretly reported his former employer, that he only did it once allegedly, and that this was supposed to help Donald Trump. Does any reasonable, sensible person believe anything that Michael Cohen says?
My background is as a prosecutor, and what I saw in that courtroom today is a travesty. Politics has no place in a court of law. Politics should be out on the campaign trail.
Time for finance news now with Sam Yang. Hi, Sam. So there have been some developments in BHP's merger deal with its UK rival.
Yeah, this merger deal has been described as the largest mining deal on record if it goes ahead, but it has met some hurdles so far. Now,
thank you for 25 years of sports news, global headlines, and local stories. Here's to celebrating your achievements and understanding Asia. Happy 25th anniversary, CMA.
This is Asia Now.
It is 11 a.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 8:30 in New Delhi and 10 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Shahida Osman. At this hour, heavy rains and a dust storm ripped through the financial capital of India, uprooting trees, causing travel chaos and topping a giant billboard onto a crowd of people. At least 14 people are dead. Renewed shelling in northern Gaza, Israeli forces return to areas where they say Hamas militants have regrouped. The south also facing heavy bombardments as aid groups warn of a deadly epidemic outbreak. And Hong Kong's leader condemns the UK's move to charge 3 men under the National Security Act with assisting an intelligence service from the city. The latest incident underscores tensions between the Asian financial hub and the British government. At least 14 people have died and more than 70 others injured in Mumbai after heavy rain and strong winds brought down a massive billboard in the Indian city. The giant billboard, measuring 70 meters by 50 meters, was bigger than the size of 2 basketball courts. It was located next to a busy road and gave way under the onslaught of the storm. It collapsed on some houses, cars, and a petrol kiosk. Now, Indian officials say rescuers are still working to save dozens feared trapped beneath the wreckage. Authorities say the billboard that went down was constructed illegally. Mumbai was hit by heavy rainfall and gusty winds, as well as a massive dust storm that crippled the transport system, uprooted trees and structures. Poor visibility led to temporary flight disruptions at Mumbai airport. Trains were also suspended. And Mumbai sits on a peninsula surrounded by the sea and is prone to severe flooding and rain-related accidents during the monsoon season, which runs from June until September. But experts predict that this year's monsoon could potentially arrive earlier than usual. Thousands of people are fleeing as fierce fighting flares up again in northern Gaza. Israeli troops are trying to recapture the area, which is seeing a resurgence of Hamas. Israel resuming air and ground attacks, sending people fleeing for their lives. Troops left northern Gaza 3 months ago, claiming to have dismantled Hamas here. But the group has apparently regrouped. Its armed wing says fighters are engaged in gun battles with Israeli forces east of Jabalia, where a huge refugee camp is located. 20 people were said to have been killed in Jabalia, with many more injured, including children. One medical worker accused Israel of targeting ambulances and their crews. While fighting rages in the north and south, Gaza's health authority is appealing for international pressure to reopen access for aid to enter via the southern border. Aid organization Oxfam is warning of a rising risk of epidemics in Rafah as people resort to drinking dirty water due to damage to infrastructure.
These Israeli protesters want to stop the flow of aid. They blocked trucks headed for Gaza, throwing and stomping on food packages. They claim the supplies will only benefit Hamas. But the Times of Israel reports the group is made up of right-wing activists who demand the release of hostages. 4 protesters include aid blocking incident to Israel and reiterated that humanitarian assistance into the enclave should not be impeded.
Aid cannot and must not be interfered with. We have raised this incident with the government of Israel, and we expect them to take appropriate action. We are continuing to have conversations about that, continuing to have conversations about ensuring that every measure possible is pursued to ensure the increase of flow of humanitarian aid so that more aid can get into Gaza.
Aid groups say no food has entered the 2 main border crossings in southern Gaza for the past week. Fighting in nearby cities has made it impossible for aid organizations to access the Kerem Shalom crossing with Israel. And the Rafah crossing with Egypt has been closed since Israeli troops seized it last week. US President Joe Biden has repeatedly warned his Israeli counterpart against a full-on invasion of Rafah, saying it will put more than 1 million people seeking refuge there at risk. Nick Harper with more on whether the Biden administration is doing enough to prevent an escalation of conflict amid calls by critics to completely halt military aid to Israel.
That's obviously what progressive Democrats have been calling on the Biden administration to do for months since the start of this conflict. But I think it's interesting to note that now that we're seeing this, at least what looks like temporary change in policy from the United States, this temporary pausing of military support to Israel, it's angered the other side, the side that has been supporting Biden's policy towards Israel up until now. So the moderate Democrats, but also the Republicans as well, who've cheered the president for giving that ironclad commitment to Israel. Indeed, we've seen Republicans in the House of Representatives float the idea of a possible bill that would essentially force the president to start sending aid that has currently been blocked. Now, we've heard from the White House during the course of the day really trying to push back against that idea that it's putting out mixed messages, that it's flip-flopping on Israel, that even it's reversing course and no longer standing by its ally in the Middle East. We heard from Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor. He was speaking about how he feels that this Rafah operation by Israel is targeted rather than being a massive military operation, and yet they are still warning the Israelis that to carry out a major offensive would, in Jake Sullivan's words, be a mistake. And he also spoke about how the United States is working with Israel to try and find better ways of beating Hamas.
Military pressure is necessary, but not sufficient to fully defeat Hamas. If Israel's military efforts are not accompanied by a political plan for the future of Gaza and the Palestinian people, the terrorists will keep coming back and Israel will remain under threat. We are seeing this happen in Gaza City. So we are talking to Israel about how to connect their military operations to a clear strategic endgame, about a holistic, integrated strategy to ensure the lasting defeat of Hamas and a better alternative future for Gaza and for the Palestinian people.
So it's clear that the US is trying to pressure Israel as much as it can. Sullivan was asked during that briefing directly whether he thought Israel was carrying out genocide. He answered no, but he did say we believe Israel can and must do more to ensure the protection and well-being of innocent civilians, something that it has been saying for many months. And let's not forget this idea of really trying to push the Israelis to work out an endgame. If it defeats Hamas, what would happen next? The US trying to do what it can to get Israel to put a plan in place to help the Palestinians and the rebuilding of Gaza.
And more than 7 months of fighting in Gaza have reduced thousands of buildings to rubble. And this includes all 12 of the enclave's tertiary education institutions, which have either been destroyed or damaged. According to Palestinian officials, more than 350 teachers and academics have been killed.
Gazans fail.
Dozens of demonstrators took to the headquarters of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, in Abuja, the country's capital, on Monday to protest recent increases in electricity prices. It follows the removal of subsidies by the West African nation's government. The protesting workers say they are frustrated that electricity supply has not improved, even for consumers paying higher.
Every protest has its own peculiarities, and when you look at this one, it is very special because it touches on the fabric of the economy. Because power is life, power is the mainstay of Nigerian economy. Getting Nigeria out of the wood, we must be able to have stable power supply.
Nigeria's power generation and supply revolves between 3,500 megawatts and 4,500 megawatts. A study has revealed fires used as a weapon in Sudan destroyed more villages and towns in the country's west in April than in any other month since the conflict began. Sudan Witness, an open-source project, said 72 villages and settlements were either destroyed or damaged by fires in April, bringing the total number of settlements hit by fire to 201. Released on Monday, the analysis by the UK-based rights group showed the number of fires surged particularly in the north and west of El Fasher. Sudan has been engulfed by violence since mid-April 2023, when tensions between the Sudanese military and the paramilitary rapid support forces broke out into intense fighting across the country. A voluntary relocation of approximately 2,000 families displaced by floods began during the weekend in Burundi. The government effected the move for the families in response to deadly floods that's wreaking havoc across the Great Lakes region and East Africa. We thought that the state had abandoned us. Thank goodness for that slight improvement to have a place to rest. I think they were prepared. Displaced families boarded buses provided by the UN Refugee Agency and moved from the shores of Gatumba, the west of the country near the border with the Democratic Republic of Congo, to Matiazo. The wish of the state is to save you from this water. You know that there have even been people killed by animals, crocodiles and hippopotamuses. We don't want that to happen again. There is work that will continue and we will help the students to continue their studies, especially the test candidates who will do tests like the others. Lake Tanganyika's rising waters have flooded various parts of Burundi, including the capital, Bujumbura. Climate experts say the situation in the region is part of extreme conditions linked to the El Nino weather phenomenon. A South African-born curator at the American Museum of Natural History was detained in Istanbul on Monday while allegedly attempting to smuggle spider and scorpion samples. Turkish media reported Lorenzo Prendini, an expert on arachnids at the New York-based institute, was held by police at Istanbul airport while trying to take some 1,500 samples out of the country. Anti-smuggling officers searched his hand luggage and removed Ziploc plastic bags that appeared to be packed with dead spiders and scorpions. They also allegedly found liquid samples of venom in plastic vials. The museum's website lists Prendini as the curator of its spider, scorpion, centipede and millipede collections. His research into spiders and scorpions has taken him to more than 30 countries, and he has published numerous scientific articles on the subject, according to the museum. An iconic mosque is being renovated. Regarded as the world's largest mud brick building, this mosque has been on UNESCO's World Heritage Danger List since 2016. On Sunday, the annual replastering of Mali's Great Mosque of Djenné was held. For the building not to fall into disrepair, a new layer of mud each year is added before the start of the rainy season in June. The plastering of the mosque is a symbol of peace. The poor, the rich, everyone is here for this activity. We will continue this tradition from generation to generation. We will pass it on to our children, and they will in turn do the same. Each year, the organizers choose a leader from among us, and this plastering protects the city of Djenné. Traditionally, men and boys are responsible for climbing the mosque and putting the new layer of mud on it, while women and girls are responsible for fetching water from the nearby river to mix with clay to make more of the mud needed for the event. My name is Fatumata Komina. I'm from Djenné. I came to help. I carried water here. May God give us the chance to see this activity next year. The plastering is done by the entire city in a communal event, which in years past was a main attraction to the tens of thousands of tourists. A lot of people talk about insecurity, and we hear that we can't come to Djenné because there is insecurity. As with the rest of Mali, Djenné's tourism industry has all but completely disappeared due to the ongoing insecurity in the country.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.